Sometimes in life we get lost, not just in the woods, but in our own memories, in our hearts. But sometimes all it takes is a small home, a resilient woman, and a child's innocent gaze to help someone who thought they had nothing left find their way back. If you enjoyed this emotional and inspiring story like Thomas's journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next stories. There are many more journeys waiting for you ahead. Rain had started falling late in the afternoon, the kind that doesn't ease in but crashes down like it's got something to prove. Thick clouds hung low over western Oregon, blotting out every trace of sunlight. Within minutes, the world turned into a sheet of cold needles. The pine trees whispered like they were warning each other, and the wooden porches in the small village of Revile began to creak under the weight of the storm. The dirt road leading into the village was now a river of mud. Old tire tracks disappeared under the water, leaving only a scattered trail of lonely footprints, fresh and unsteady. Then he appeared, a man soaked to the bone, stumbling like he'd been walking for days, or like he'd just escaped something he couldn't explain. His old military jacket was torn at the elbows, streaked with mud and ash. It looked like he'd crawled through a battlefield. His face was hollow, beard rough and unkempt, eyes sunken, scanning the world without seeing it. But the strangest thing was he didn't know where he was going, didn't know why he was here. No direction, no memory. Every step he took was a struggle, every breath a battle. Inside his head was a loop of chaos, screams, flashes of light fire ripping through the earth, and gunfire. So much gunfire, but no names, no dates, no one waiting at the end of this road. A pickup truck roared past behind him, spraying muddy water up his back. The cold cut through the layers of his clothes, straight to his bones. He froze, stared into the empty road ahead, then took 2 shaky steps before his knees finally gave out. He collapsed by the roadside, his forehead striking the edge of a rock. Blood mingled with rain, thin and red. No scream, no groan. He just lay there, as if he'd finally found a reason to stop. His eyes stared up at the steel-colored sky and then slowly closed. A crow flew overhead, its harsh call slicing through the rain. In the distance, to the right of the road, a dim light flickered from a small wooden cabin tucked at the edge of the forest. And from that cabin, a woman with an umbrella was walking along the muddy path, picking up fallen branches. She saw him.
Oh my God.
She dropped her basket and ran. Rain hammered her wool coat, but she didn't care. She dropped to her knees beside the man, rolled him gently, checked for a pulse, then stared at his lifeless face.
Hey, can you hear me? Are you hurt?
Nothing. He didn't move. Jessica bit her lip. Her hands trembled, but she stayed calm. She'd studied first aid. She had lost her husband once to hesitation. She wasn't about to let another man die in front of her. With the strength of a mother who'd spent years tending a garden, Jessica hooked her arms under his and dragged him through the flooded path, step by step, toward the cabin she shared with her little girl, August. Under the dim porch light, she opened the door and pulled the soaked stranger inside. She laid him on the old sofa, its edges worn and faded, then hurried to grab towels and warm water. Outside, the rain kept falling, and inside, among the quiet and the flicker of lamplight, a nameless man had just stumbled into the lives of a mother and her child, bringing with him a mystery even he couldn't begin to understand. Inside the old wooden cabin, warmth from the wood stove crept through the faded yellow walls. The fire crackled, spitting sparks, and the scent of burning pine sap. Every time Jessica moved, the oak floor creaked beneath her feet. She was kneeling beside the unconscious man, gently dabbing the blood from his forehead with a warm washcloth. She didn't say a word, no complaints, no fear on her face. Her hands moved with the steadiness of someone who'd done this before, and she had. For months, she had cared for her husband during his long fight with cancer. Wind howled outside. Rain drummed steadily against the tin roof like distant war drums. In the small living room, only the dim flicker of a kerosene lamp and the man's shallow breaths broke the silence. Here, a soft creak from the stairs. A little girl with blonde hair around 8 years old peeked down from the railing wearing a speckled blue flannel pajama set.
Mom, who is that?
Come down slowly, sweetheart. Watch your step.
August padded down the stairs, eyes wide, as she took in the stranger lying still on the couch. Jessica ran her fingers through her daughter's hair, then motioned to the stool nearby.
I found him on the road. He'd collapsed. He's hurt. Can you grab the first aid kit for me?
The one under the table.
That's the one. You're amazing.
August ran to get it, pulling a knitted throw from the back of the couch to wrap around herself, like the chill inside matched the cold outside. She handed the box to her mother, but kept her eyes locked on the man's face. Jessica opened the kit, pulled out gauze and antiseptic, dabbed a cotton ball, and gently pressed it to the wound. The man flinched slightly. His eyelids twitched.
He's responding. He might wake up soon.
She turned to August and gave her a soft smile.
Are you scared?
No, but who is he?
Jessica hesitated. That was the question she couldn't answer.
I don't know yet. But I think he just needs a place to feel safe. At least for tonight.
August nodded, like it made perfect sense that strangers who needed help always had a place here. Maybe that was what Jessica had taught her, through quiet examples, ever since the day her husband passed and it was just the two of them. Jessica tucked an extra blanket over the man, then turned to her daughter.
Go on up to bed, baby. I'll stay with him. If anything happens, I'll call you.
August stood, hesitating just a second to glance back at the stranger before quietly tiptoeing up the stairs. Her footsteps were light as air, vanishing behind the bedroom door. In the quiet that followed, only the sound of rain, the steady pop of the fire, and Jessica's slow breath filled the space. She sat beside the man, still nameless, still silent, and let out a long sigh, barely audible, as if trying to push away the unease starting to settle deep inside her chest. What she didn't know, what she couldn't yet know, was that from this moment on, everything in her life and her daughter's was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. The soft flicker of a kerosene lamp cast a dim, wavering glow on the aged wooden ceiling. Somewhere nearby, a wooden chair creaked as if someone had shifted their weight. The man on the sofa stirred, his breathing deepened, and slowly his eyes opened. The ceiling was unfamiliar. There was the scent of burning wood and herbs, strangely familiar, like a dream he couldn't quite name. He blinked and turned his head. A modest living room fire still glowing in the hearth, and a woman sitting a few steps away knitting a brown scarf. Her hair was tied neatly on top of her head, calm, collected, like she was used to watching over people through the night.
Where am I?
His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper, like a man who'd just crawled out of the desert. Jessica set her yarn down and stood up, walking toward him.
You're at my house, in Redvale. I found you passed out on the side of the road. It was pouring rain.
Thomas tried to sit up. A sharp pain shot through his head like someone had slammed a hammer against it. He touched his forehead, bandaged. Dried blood.
I don't remember anything.
What?
I don't know who I am. Nothing. No name, no ID, just blank.
Jessica took a small step back, not in fear, but to get a better look at him. She studied his face, searching for something solid in the fog behind his eyes.
Maybe you're just lost. Maybe it's trauma, a concussion. Sometimes memories take time.
Thomas let out a quiet laugh, dry, foreign even to his own ears.
I'm not even sure if that name is mine. It's like someone wiped the slate clean.
Then, until you remember, I'll call you Thomas. That name, it fits you.
He looked up at her. She didn't explain, it didn't need to. The name might have meant nothing, but right now, it was a place to start.
Thomas, okay.
They sat in silence for a beat. Outside, the rain had eased, replaced by wind and the occasional soft drip from the gutter.
I'm Jessica. I live here with my daughter, August. It's not much, but it's warm and it's home.
Thomas gave a slow nod, closing his eyes like he wanted to remember how that felt, someone saying their name like it mattered.
Thank you for helping me.
Jessica smiled, gently nodding. She grabbed an extra pillow and a thin blanket, laying them beside him.
Get some rest. I'll fix something hot in the morning. Maybe food'll help jog your memory.
Thomas lay back, staring up at the ceiling again. He didn't know where he'd come from, but something deep inside him whispered that this place, this cabin, this woman with calm eyes, this thick quiet felt like something he'd lost a long time ago. A single shaft of sunlight pierced the dusty window and landed right on Thomas's face. He blinked slowly, sitting up on the old couch that still held the faint scent of firewood and antiseptic. His head throbbed, but not like the night before. The quiet around him felt unfamiliar, but comforting in a strange and steady way. His bare feet hit the wooden floorboards, each step drawing a low creak. From the kitchen, the clatter of pans mixed with the smell of something warm and sweet. Fresh coffee, baking batter. That room, sunlit and cozy, felt like a heartbeat he hadn't known he'd missed. Jessica stood with her back to him, wearing a faded apron, stirring something in a cast-iron skillet. August sat at the table, chin propped in her hands, her hair tied to one side with a red ribbon.
Mom, is he awake yet?
I think he's just about to be.
Thomas cleared his throat softly and both turned to look at him.
Good morning. You feeling any better?
Yeah, better thank you. And good morning, August.
The little girl giggled, tilting her head, looking at Thomas with a mix of curiosity and warmth.
Can you eat pancakes? Mom makes the best ones.
Then I guess I better try one.
Jessica placed a plate of pancakes and a hot cup of coffee in front of him. She didn't ask about his memory, didn't press. She just flipped another portion of batter into the pan as if feeding a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. After breakfast, while Jessica washed dishes, Thomas took a slow walk around the house. Everything here was old, the floor worn down, the window frames chipped, the roof clearly had leaks, but it was clean, orderly. Every corner bore the mark of someone who cared. On the wall, a few framed photos, Jessica with a kind-eyed man and a much younger August beaming in a flower print dress. Thomas paused at the photo of the man. Something tugged at him, not memory, but empathy. He didn't remember loving anyone, but he knew the feeling of absence. He knew what it was to lose. When he stepped back out onto the porch, Jessica was fussing with a rotting beam on the awning.
This spot always leaks when it rains. I keep meaning to fix it, but not easy finding help around here.
You got a hammer, nails, and a ladder?
Yeah, but...
Then I'll fix it. Feels like the least I can do.
She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. No protest, no fake modesty. That day, Thomas climbed up and replaced the warped shingles, nailed down loose boards. By midday, he'd reorganized the woodshed. In the late afternoon, he helped Jessica repair the broken fence around the garden. They didn't talk much, but every movement between them was easy, wordless, in sync, like they'd done this before in another life. And when the sun dipped low, casting gold over the distant pines, Thomas sat on the front steps, finishing a glass of water, while August ran across the yard, laughing as she chased a scruffy grey cat. A part of him whispered that it was time to go, but something stronger, deeper, told him to stay. Night settled fast over Redvale. Once the sun dipped behind the ridge of pines, cold mist swept in from the woods, collecting on rooftops and window ledges. In the small back room behind the kitchen, Thomas lay on the makeshift bed Jessica had set up. The wool blanket was warm, carrying the faint, earthy scent of herbs and aged cotton, more comforting than any place he could remember, if he remembered anything at all. He turned on his side eyes, tracing the cracked wood ceiling above him. The fractures twisted like roads that led nowhere. He didn't know who he was. But his body, every tendon, every instinct remembered. How to grip a hammer, how to scale a roof, how to drive a nail straight with a single stroke. How to sense someone approaching behind him without looking. Those weren't things you picked up by chance. A cat meowed in the distance. Upstairs, the wooden floor groaned softly as August ran to her bedroom. Wind whispered through the cracks in the windows like voices from a life he once lived but no longer belonged to. Sleep took him without warning. In the dream, no faces, only sounds, gunfire, screams, the acrid stench of gunpowder smoke and blood, a dark room, red lights flickering, a voice shouting through a radio, fall back, they're everywhere. He was running, rifle in hand, not just any rifle, a precision weapon heavy fitted with a scope, not something civilians carry. He ducked behind a crumbled wall, watched a teammate take a bullet to the chest, eyes wide gone, before he could say a word. Thomas's heart pounded every step, feeling like his chest might tear open, every explosion like a punch to the skull. Then he was on a rooftop rifle, steady on his shoulder, breath-controlled, sight locked on a distant figure, a man with a scarf holding a rifle. One shot. He pulled the trigger. The crack of the gun jerked him awake. He sat up, drenched in sweatshirt, clinging to his back. His breathing was sharp, ragged, heart pounding like a war drum. The room was still. Moonlight spilled through the window, cold and silver. He buried his face in his hands, fingers pressing into his temples, trying to claw the fragments of memory back. But they slipped through like dry sand, through an open palm. A soft knock. The door creaked open and Jessica stepped in, holding a cup of water.
I heard something. You okay?
Thomas nodded, but his eyes were still haunted.
Just a nightmare, I think.
The kind only soldiers have.
Thomas looked at her. He didn't answer. But she didn't push. Her gaze softened, no judgment. She walked in, set the water on the bedside table.
After my husband passed, I had nights like that. Not from combat, but helplessness. Fighting a battle inside one no one else could see.
Thomas lowered his head. For the first time, he felt like someone this stranger actually understood something in him he couldn't even name.
You're strong, Jessica.
Not because I wanted to be. Because I had to be.
She stepped back out and closed the door softly behind her. Thomas lay back, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling once more. One question hung in the silence, refusing to fade. Who am I? And more importantly, what kind of man was I? 3 days had passed since that cold, rainy night. Thomas had stayed at Jessica's house like it was the most natural thing in the world. No questions, no terms. He patched the leaking roof, cleared pine needles from the gutters, reinforced the sagging garden fence and brought in firewood every evening. Jessica had stopped asking about his memory. She understood that silence could be a kind of healing too. August took to Thomas quickly. She dragged him into Puzzle's jump rope and laughed loud and free like the world had never hurt her. But that afternoon, something unusual came down the road, a road that rarely saw more than a few travelers a week. Thomas was stacking wood behind the house when he heard it. The sound of an engine, low, heavy, with a certain urgency in its tone. It wasn't a tractor, and it wasn't the ice cream truck. He stood up, shielding his eyes with his hand. A black SUV, caked in dried mud, crawled out from the edge of the pine woods. It moved slow, like it was searching. Then it came to a full stop right in front of Jessica's yard. Thomas stepped out onto the porch. Jessica, watering plants near the door, had already looked up.
That's odd. No one ever comes in from that side.
The car door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad, wearing an old brown leather jacket and mud-stained boots, hair slicked back, a neatly trimmed beard. He raised a hand and gave a smile that tried too hard to be friendly.
Hey there. Looks like we're running low on gas. Any chance we could borrow a phone? Maybe even get a little fuel.
Thomas stepped down off the porch, cautious but smiling.
Where are you folks coming from?
Took a detour through the woods. GPS got us turned around. Didn't expect to end up this far in. Just hoping for a little help. If that's all right.
Then the other 3 doors opened, one man with a baseball cap pulled low over his face, another carrying a large backpack. The last one was younger, chewing gum, blank expression like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jessica glanced quickly at Thomas. He caught it a look that said, "We won't turn them away, but also don't let your guard down."
You're welcome to rest a bit. I've got coffee on, and there might be a little gas left in the shed.
Jack smiled, motioning for his group to follow. The friendliness stayed on his lips, but Thomas saw it something off in Jack's eyes, something calculated. As they stepped inside, Thomas took a single step back. Not because he was afraid, but because instinct had spoken loud and clear. These men weren't just lost travelers. The little house felt more crowded than usual. The dining table, normally just big enough for 3, had 2 extra chairs pulled in from the porch. Jessica brought out a pot of potato soup and some cornbread, doing her best to keep things feeling casual. August sat close beside Thomas, eyes wide, staring at the 4 unfamiliar men like something out of an old movie she wasn't sure she liked. Jack sat at the head of the table like he belonged there. Lonnie, the guy with the baseball cap, clutched a beer he clearly brought with him. Brett, the bulky one with the backpack, barely ate and kept glancing around the room like he was casing the place. And Mikey, the youngest, kept sneaking glances at Jessica with a look that made Thomas's jaw tighten.
This is delicious. You make all this yourself.
Well, there's not really anyone else around to help.
Shame. Someone let a woman like you stay out here alone.
Jessica didn't reply. She just ladled more soup into a bowl. Thomas stayed quiet, but his eyes never left Jack. There was something behind the charm, something cold, measuring. August leaned in and whispered,
I don't like the guy with the beard. He keeps looking at Mom weird.
Eat your food, sweetheart. Grown-ups will handle it.
After dinner, Jessica moved into the kitchen to clean up. Thomas stayed behind in the living room with the group. The TV played the evening news. When a report came on about increased gang activity near the southern border, specifically involving a stolen weapons shipment, Jack reached for the remote and muted it.
Everyone's got their tastes. I find it informative. Tells you how screwed up the world's getting.
Thomas kept his eyes on the silent footage. Surveillance cam clips, grainy video, armed suspects fleeing a warehouse. Faces weren't clear, but the builds, the way they moved, something about them felt disturbingly familiar. Jack stood up and grabbed his coat.
Thanks for the meal. I'll sleep in the car tonight. We'll be out of your hair first thing.
Thomas followed him outside as he lit a cigarette. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled thick with damp earth.
How'd you end up way out here anyway?
That's a rare question. Most folks out this way don't care who comes and goes. I figured you'd be the same.
I care about anyone who might be a threat to people I know.
Then maybe stop caring so much. Might help you sleep better.
Jack gave a tight smile, squinted through the smoke, and turned back toward the car. Thomas stayed rooted in place, his hand unconsciously curling into a fist. Something had shifted inside him. That old, buried instinct, the one that flared when danger was near, was wide awake now. He couldn't see the threat clearly yet, but every nerve in his body was screaming, "Get ready." He walked back inside and headed upstairs. August's bedroom light was still on. She was curled up with her stuffed bare eyes wide and waiting.
That man's not gonna hurt Mom, right?
No, not as long as I'm here.
He pulled the blanket up over her shoulders and sat on the edge of the bed until her breathing evened out and she fell asleep. Then he went back to his own room, but that night, Thomas didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, back against the wall, and for the first time since waking up in that storm, he wished desperately that he could remember, not for himself, but so he'd know how to protect them if things went bad. It was close to midnight. The wind had died, but thick fog clung to the windows like a silent warning. Thomas sat alone in the living room, the flicker of an old TV, the only light in the room. The fire crackled softly in the stove, but inside his head nothing felt calm. He turned the volume down low, careful not to wake Jessica and August upstairs. The news cycled through politics, weather traffic. But then one report made his breath catch. A dangerous arms trafficking group escaped capture during a federal raid near the southern border. Authorities confirm 4 suspects, all with extensive criminal histories. The group's leader has been identified as Jack Calver, approximately 6'3", brown hair, trimmed beard. A sketch appeared on the screen. The face? It was him. The man who'd been at their dinner table just hours earlier. Alongside him, Lonnie Brett and Mikey, no doubt. Thomas sat up straighter. His breath grew heavier. Goosebumps spread down his arms, but his eyes stayed fixed on the screen. The suspects are believed to be armed and extremely dangerous. Sources indicate they may be heading west, avoiding major highways. Thomas turned off the TV. He didn't need more details. He knew. Everything lined up. He stood and walked quietly to the front door. The air outside was colder now. The black SUV still sat by the road windows, fogged. No movement, but he knew they weren't all sleeping. One could be on watch, maybe 2. He stepped back inside, went to the kitchen, opened the drawer near the sink, found a kitchen knife 9 inches long. His hands didn't shake, not because he wasn't afraid, but because something deep inside him, something long asleep, had just woken up. As he stepped out of the kitchen, Jessica stood in the hallway, wrapped in her robe, eyes wide and unsure.
What's going on?
Thomas looked at her for a long moment. He knew the second he spoke, everything would change, but he couldn't keep it in.
I think those men, they're not just travelers. They're dangerous, Jessica. Really dangerous.
What do you mean?
They're fugitives, arms dealers, just showed up on the news. Jack, he's their leader.
Jessica froze, her hands clenching the edge of her robe.
Oh, God. August.
Both of them looked toward the stairs.
Try to sleep. In the morning, we'll figure out how to get you and August out of here.
You think they suspect anything?
Not yet, but if they find out I know who they are, everything will shift. Fast.
Jessica nodded. Her eyes were red, but she didn't cry. She wasn't just a widow anymore. She was a mother, and mothers don't break when their children are in danger. Thomas studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. He didn't know if he'd ever loved anyone before, but if he had to choose someone to trust right now, it was her. He lit the oil lamp again in the living room, then sat down in the chair back to the door, ears tuned to every creak and whisper in the night. The night was far from over, and he knew he couldn't afford to sleep. The next morning, no rain, but the sky hung heavy with grey clouds, like even the weather knew something was wrong. Jessica made breakfast, early eggs, toast and coffee. Her hands trembled slightly, but she moved through the motions as usual. Thomas had been up for a while. He'd checked the back door, every entry point, even walked the perimeter behind the chicken coop, scanning the surroundings like he was back on a mission. But when Jessica called for August to come down for breakfast, there was no answer.
August. Come on, honey, breakfast is hot.
Silence. She called again. No small footsteps, no teasing voice from upstairs. A chill crept down her spine. She rushed up the stairs, flung open her daughter's bedroom door. Empty. The room was untouched. Bed made neatly, just like Jessica had taught her to do since she was little. But no sign she'd left to use the bathroom, to play, or to hide. No shoes, no jacket, and no stuffed bear. August never went anywhere without it. Jessica ran downstairs, her face drained of color.
Thomas. She's gone.
Thomas set down his coffee and sprinted for the stairs. He checked the bathroom, the closet under the bed, every corner.
Nothing. She's not here.
They burst outside. Thomas called her name, circling the house past the woodpile, the garden, the chicken coop. No answer. Then he stopped. The mud near the back fence showed fresh prints, small ones like a child's. But beside them, larger, deeper tracks. Drag marks. The gate at the edge of the yard hung slightly open, leading to the narrow path into the woods. Jessica collapsed to her knees.
No. No, not August. God, no.
Thomas caught her before she fell completely, and then movement near the road. The black SUV, a door opened. Jack stepped out, hands in his pockets, calm expression, but his eyes were ice.
I think we should have a little talk.
Where's August?
She's here safe for now, as long as you both cooperate.
You took my daughter.
I don't like the word took. I prefer collateral. You help me, I help you keep your little girl.
What do you want?
A car, fuel, someone who knows these back roads. No questions.
Thomas clenched his fists, his gaze locked on Jack's like steel on steel. There was no doubt anymore this man wasn't just dangerous. He was a predator in human skin, a gun runner who'd do anything to stay one step ahead.
You're smart. I saw that right away. Don't make me prove you wrong.
Thomas gave a slow nod. He turned to Jessica. She nodded too, tears streaking down her cheeks, lips pressed tight to stop them from trembling. A plan was already forming in Thomas's head. They had no choice, not yet, but they had time. And if Jack so much as touched a single hair on August's head, there would be blood. They left Jessica's house just before noon. The SUV rolled out of Redvale tires, kicking up mud as it barreled down the narrow road. Thomas sat behind the wheel, Jack in the passenger seat. Brett and Lonnie were in the back. Mikey wasn't in the car. He'd gone with August to a place Jack hadn't specified. Jessica sat in the middle of the back row, her eyes locked on the horizon, unblinking. Her hands clutched a red ribbon, August's, the one she'd found, tangled in the bushes that morning. Her eyes were dry now. No more tears. Just a silent panic building deeper in her chest with every mile. Thomas kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was a maze. What were they doing? Helping armed fugitives escape, trading everything for one little girl. No, this wasn't surrender. This was strategy. Every bump, every bend, he was measuring distance, terrain, speed, like something automatic had kicked in. He didn't remember his past, but his body remembered how to think like a soldier.
Turn left. There's a shortcut through the mountain. We're taking that.
That road's rough, loose rock, bad traction. Not great for a vehicle this size.
You just drive. Leave the rest to me.
Thomas gave a faint smile. That line, it told him everything he needed to know, but before he could act, Brett lunged from behind, striking Thomas hard in the head with the butt of a rifle. Everything went black. No more forest roads, no SUV, no Jack barking orders, just the roar of helicopters' gunfire like thunder and fragmented screams crackling through a radio headset. In the haze, Thomas saw himself crawling through underbrush, tumbling down a slope, rifle tight in hand, a specific kind, an M1110 SAS semi-automatic sniper system, not the kind civilians carry. He was in a foreign jungle mid-mission hunting something big. A patch on his chest read USMC, United States Marine Corps. His eyes snapped open in the dark. His head pounded, blood soaking the collar of his shirt. But now he remembered. His name was Thomas Clay, former Marine, recon sergeant, served in Kandahar, Ramadi, and Colombia. He had been trained to survive, to kill, to endure, and to protect what he swore never to lose. And he would not lose August. The first things he noticed when he came to were the scent of car leather, lingering gunpowder on someone's jacket, and the crunch of gravel under tires. He kept his eyes closed for a few seconds, breathing slow, letting the nausea fade. He was lying in the back seat. His hands weren't tied. A mistake. Lonnie sat up front, half-turned, snacking while one earbud dangled from his phone. Jack was driving. Jessica was beside the door, staring into the trees. Brett was gone. Mikey and August still unaccounted for. Thomas glanced out the window. Twisting mountain roads, no houses, thick woods. The perfect place to make someone disappear. But Thomas Clay was back now. He shifted slightly, let out a low groan. Lonnie glanced back, smirking. Thomas raised a hand to his head, groaning again, slow and deliberate. His fingers slid beneath his collar, retrieving a thin length of survival cord he'd hidden long ago. Fallujah taught him well, never be without options.
What's your endgame?
A deal, Thomas. Nothing personal. We get across the border. You drive, you know the roads. Once we're clear, you all walk away.
Thomas let out a dry laugh.
And August?
She'll be returned. Safe if everything stays smooth. If it doesn't, that's on you.
Thomas gave a faint nod. He'd already freed the seatbelt release, the kind with a built-in edge sharp enough to cut rope if used right. Small tools, big outcomes. He looked at Jessica. She hadn't said a word, but her eyes had changed. They saw it. The shift in him, the readiness. As the SUV turned onto a steep incline, Thomas glanced up at the rearview mirror. A state trooper vehicle was trailing about 300 yards behind, close enough to be watching, far enough not to raise suspicion. This was it. He moved his hand to his thigh subtly, signaling 3 fingers raised 3 armed threats. Thumb-tapped palm, they had weapons. The officer didn't respond, but Thomas knew they'd seen, and they were watching. This was now a waiting game. He couldn't act yet, not in the car, not until he knew August's location. But now he had 2 things, time and memory, and a silent promise he made to himself.
I'll bring her back, even if I have to take every one of you down to do it.
The SUV climbed the final steep stretch of road, pulling up to an abandoned building buried deep in the woods. The brick walls were cracked and peeling. Broken windows, knee-high weeds, spray painted on one side of the building, K-20, a code known only to those in the underworld as a safe drop point. Jack killed the engine and motioned for everyone to get out. Thomas stepped out, pretending to stumble from the earlier blow, but inside every sense was alert, mapping the terrain and noting positions, wind direction, light angles. Anything could be a weapon if you moved fast enough. Brett emerged from the building. Beside him, Mikey, holding a small girl, bound and gagged. August. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she held her ground, brave despite the terror. Jessica gasped and rushed forward, but Lonnie grabbed her arm and held her back.
You promised. You said she wouldn't be hurt.
And I'll keep that promise, as long as no one does anything stupid.
Thomas didn't move, but inside him something twisted like a blade. He looked at August, frozen with fear, tears in her eyes, still trying to stay strong for her mother. His mind went into full combat mode. Every training simulation he'd ever done replayed in slow motion. Distance to Brett 4 steps, to Mikey 6. He could take one down in 3 seconds if he hit the throat, but then the other could shoot. Not worth the risk, not yet.
Inside. We need to settle a few things before we go. After that, you can all go home.
Thomas bit down his rage and followed them into the building. Inside was dark lit only by a flickering overhead bulb, mold on the walls, the air thick with fuel and rot. Mikey shoved August into a corner. Jessica was tied to a wooden beam. Thomas stood center, arms loose. Brett whispered something to Lonnie, then pulled out his gun, checking the chamber. Jack stepped up, leaning on the table.
2 options. 1, we clean the slate. No witnesses. 2, we take a gamble on a man with no name, no past.
You don't have to choose.
Oh yeah?
Because I already did.
In a blur, Thomas lunged at Brett, yanking the gun from his grip and spinning to kick Lonnie hard across the face. The gun fired a wild shot that buried itself in the wall. Mikey panicked, reaching for August, but Thomas shot him in the shoulder before he could move another inch. Jessica screamed, but her eyes shone with shock. August curled into a ball as Mikey crumpled. Jack backed away, pulling his gun. Thomas rolled behind a beam, signaling Jessica to duck. Lonnie was crawling, a knife in hand. Thomas kicked him in the throat, dropping him cold. Brett lay unconscious. Only Jack was left. He leveled his gun at August, who trembled in the middle of the room.
1 more step, and I shoot her.
Thomas stood tall, weapon raised, but then a gunshot cracked. Not his. Jack dropped, clutching his shoulder. His gun flew from his hand. The back door slammed open. 3 armed officers stormed in. The lead officer approached, eyes locked on Thomas. "Officer Thomas Clay, we know who you are. We've been watching since you signaled." Thomas nodded. He didn't say a word, just moved to August and wrapped her tightly in his arms.
I told you, didn't I? I said I'd bring you home.
And for the first time since she'd been taken, August broke down in sobs, safe again. Late afternoon. A light drizzle fell over Redvale, softer than the stormy night when Thomas first arrived, but not soft enough to wash away everything they had endured. The police cruiser pulled up to Jessica's gate. The ivy still clung to the fence. The little swing August once sat on still swayed in the breeze. Everything looked the same, but none of the 3 who stepped out of the car were the same as before. Jessica walked slowly, her arm wrapped around her daughter's shoulders. August leaned against her, still clutching Thomas's big hand, like letting go might pull her back into the nightmare. Thomas followed behind his eyes, scanning every stone on the path, every board on the porch roof, repairs he'd made just a week ago. The silence was thick, and for the first time since everything happened, they could finally breathe, finally realize they'd made it. The house was cold. Jessica lit the wood stove. Thomas boiled water. August changed clothes and curled up with a pillow on the couch, saying nothing. No one asked her to. Silence was part of healing now. When the fire warmed the room, Jessica brought out a cup of tea.
Thank you for not leaving us.
Thomas didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames, then tapped his fingers softly on the table.
If there's anyone worth coming back for, it's you and August.
Jessica sat beside him. She didn't take his hand, but the space between them no longer felt like distance. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside there was fire, there was tea. There were 3 people, not perfect, not whole, but standing together against the dark. After a simple dinner, August nestled into her mother's lap, eyelids drooping from exhaustion. Jessica carried her upstairs, tucked her in, and stayed by her side longer than usual. Downstairs, Thomas cleaned up. He moved slowly, deliberately, wiping down the counter, organizing utensils, folding the dish towel, like each task helped settle the storm still swirling inside him. When Jessica came back down, he was already seated by the fireplace, eyes closed but not asleep.
Are you planning to leave?
Thomas opened his eyes, turned to her.
Do you want me to?
No, but I thought maybe now that you remember you'd want to go back to where you came from.
I'm not sure I ever really had a place, but this feels like a place I could start again.
She sat beside him, no love confession, no kiss, just 2 people sitting together after the storm, knowing they weren't alone anymore. The next morning the skies cleared, no rain, no wind, just a thin mist resting gently on dew-covered grass. No engines, no knocking at the door, no suspicion or hidden weapons. Thomas was up early. He wore an old flannel shirt Jessica had left folded by the bed, still warm with sunlight from yesterday. In the kitchen, he made coffee, moving quietly like he didn't want to break the calm. Jessica came down a little later, her hair still unbrushed, robe loosely tied. She stopped when she saw Thomas cooking eggs.
You cook.
Just remembered that last night, along with a few other things.
She didn't ask what else, but there was something in her eyes now, something bright, fragile. Hope, maybe, or something even more rare, trust. August crept downstairs. Her small feet barely made a sound. She stopped by the doorway, watching her mum and Thomas laugh quietly at the table.
Mom?
Jessica turned, smiling, arms open.
Come here, baby.
The girl ran into her lap, but her eyes stayed on Thomas. After a moment, she spoke her first words since the nightmare ended.
You're not leaving, right?
Thomas paused, then nodded.
Not if you don't want me to.
So, you're part of our family now, right, Mom?
Jessica hugged her daughter tight. She didn't answer, not out loud. But when she looked at Thomas, the answer was already there. After breakfast, the 3 of them went outside. Thomas helped August replant the flower pots that had tipped over. Jessica trimmed back the wild vines along the fence. The air was crisp, the sky wide, the kind of quiet you only notice after chaos. By midday, the sun poured gold across the yard. Thomas sat on the porch step, sipping lemonade Jessica brought out. She sat beside him, both watching August play beneath the trees.
How long have you been living like this?
2 years since my husband died.
You're stronger than you think.
I don't feel strong. I just never gave myself permission to fall apart. Not with August watching.
She looked at him. The way she looked had changed. No hesitation, no walls. Just honesty, open and raw.
If you want, I could stay. Not because I owe you, but because I need somewhere to belong.
She didn't answer with words. She leaned gently, letting her hair brush his shoulder. That was enough. Quiet, simple, real. The kind of answer you don't forget. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. We hope the journey of Thomas, Jessica, and August touched your heart just as they found each other in their darkest moments. If you enjoy heartfelt human stories like this one, please subscribe to the channel and share the video to help spread the beauty of love, courage, and sacrifice. See you in the next story.